Hi everyone, so here's the solution video for your 1 and 2 step equations. Remember, we're always going to have you start out by drawing those two lines, undo PEMDAS, so we're going the opposite way. We're going to start out with addition property of equality. So that will give us, so we're subtracting 2 from both sides, give us 4 equals a over 4. The opposite of dividing by 4 is multiplying by 4. So once we do that, on both sides we have, that's an A by the way, it looks like a 9. We will end up with 16 equals A. And I guess I'm going to have to write a lot smaller. Alright, so for this next one, I'm just going to go through and draw the lines on all of these right now. Makes it seems like it's a little easier. Okay, adding 6 to both sides, so we have 4x equals 1, and then the opposite of multiplying by 4 is multiplying by 1/4 or dividing by 4, so x equals 1/4. We're going to add 7 to both sides, so that leaves us with 9x equals 0. We have to write the 0 since we don't have anything else on that side. The opposite of multiplying by 9 is multiplying by 1/9 or dividing by 9, so that will be 0 divided by 9 is 0. Okay, subtract 4 from both sides. So we have -4 equals 2/3 n. The opposite of multiplying by 2/3 is multiplying by 3/2. Just switch them. So we do that to both sides. Now I'm going to make the 1 so it can look a little nicer. Alright, I have my numerator of a 4 and a denominator of 2. Those can both be divided by 2. So 2 divided by 2 is 1. 4 divided by 2 is 2. I always like to simplify beforehand. 3 times 2 is 6, and that's a negative, and then the 1 on the bottom, so that will just leave us with -6n. Add 5 to both sides, and we will end up with 1 equals r over 20. The opposite of dividing by 20 is multiplying by 20, so that will give us 20 equals r. Subtract 5 from both sides. This will leave us with -6 equals 6x. Divide both sides by 6 or multiply by 1/6, and that simply leaves us with -1 equals x. Here we're just going to subtract 93 from both sides. You might have noticed that this is only going to be a one-step problem since the coefficient is a 1 in front of the v. So we have v equals, and that will be -85. Subtract 3 from both sides, leaving us with 1/2 n equals -5. Multiply by the opposite, so we'll multiply it by 2/1, which is the same thing as 2. That will cancel out, leaving us with just 1n, and this will be a negative times a positive is a negative. 5 times 2 is 10. Subtract 1 from both sides, and we have -9x equals -81. Now remember, we have to get rid of the whole coefficient, which is both the negative and the 9. So we are going to multiply by 1/9, which is the same thing as dividing by -9. So either way you want to write it, these will cancel out, and that will leave us with x equals negative, and a negative, remember, is a positive, so 81 divided by 9 is simply 9. On this side we we add 10 to both sides, leaving us with, we have more positives than negatives. How many more? 4 more, and 2n on this side. I'm going to multiply by the inverse, or I could divide both sides by 2. I'm just showing you both ways you can do it. So we end up with 2 equals n. All right, on to the next side. Again, I'm going to go through and just draw these lines really quick. Okay. Subtract 2 from both sides. That'll leave us with negative 4 equals 4v. Multiply by the inverse, which is 1 over 4, which is the same as dividing by 4. And so negative 4 divided by 4 is negative 1, and that will equal v. Over here, we're going to get rid of the 60. So we're going to do the opposite. Subtract 60 from both sides. And I'm going to have more negatives than positives. So let me think for a moment. We end up with 36 will equal negative 12x. Multiply by 1 over negative 12, which is the same as dividing by negative 12. And that will give us a negative divided by negative is positive. 36 divided by 12 is 3, and that will equal x on the other side. Okay, so subtract 5 from both sides. So we have negative 20 equals negative 1/4 m. Multiply by the inverse. The opposite of negative 1/4 is 4 over a negative 1. Doesn't matter where the negative is as long as you have one of them. And so I'm going to do that same thing on this side. So 4 over 1. Notice that's the same thing as 4, and I'm just going to put the negative on the top so you can see we're really just multiplying by a negative 4. And so negative 4 times a negative 20 will give me a positive 80, and on this side it cancels out, gives us m, so 80m. And over here, we're going to add 10 to both sides. So that's negative 3v equals, I have more negatives than positives. How many more negatives? 81 more negatives. Then I'm going to multiply by the inverse, which is the same as dividing by the negative 3. And so that will leave us with v. A negative divided by a negative is a positive. 81 divided by 3, let's see, 3 goes into 8. 2 times 6, 7, 8. So that's 27, because I had 2 left over. All right, I'm going to go ahead and subtract 7 from both sides. So we have 8n equals, I have more positives than negatives, so we have to figure out how many more positives than negatives. So 30, 26, 20, that's 24. Then I can multiply by the inverse, which is 1 over 8, or divide by 8, same thing. Those cancel out, leaving us with n equals 24 divided by 8 is 3. So add 13 to both sides. Remember, addition property of equality. So negative 9x equals, let's see, subtract this, we have 0, 9, 90. Now I'm going to multiply by the inverse, which will be 1 over negative 9, which is the same as dividing by negative 9. And remember, that is the multiplication property of equality. On this side, that leaves us with x equals, a positive divided by a negative is a negative, and 90 divided by 9 is 10. Okay, over here we're going to subtract 516 from both sides, addition property of equality. That leaves us with n equals, both are negative, so we have a lot more negatives, so we have 517. How many of you noticed that that was going to be a one-step problem? Only one thing to do because the coefficient was a 1. Okay, so here we go. Subtract 63 from both sides, and we have 7k equals, let's see, 63, 73, 83. So that will be 21 positives because I have more positives than negatives. Multiplied by the inverse, which is 1 over 7, which is the same as dividing by 7. So that leaves us with k equals positive divided by positive is a positive, and 21 divided by 7 is 3. All right, almost done. Subtract 8 from both sides. Addition property of equality. That leaves us with 3/4 b equals more negatives than positives. How many more negatives? 3 more negatives. Going to multiply by the inverse, which is 4 over 3. So I'm going to do the same thing to this side. So that is the multiplication property of equality. Numerators and denominators cancel out, leaving us with 1b. Now over here, you can expose the 1 if you want. The 3 divided by 3 is 1. 3 divided by 3 is 1. So I just simplified before. I see that I have a 1 on the bottom, so I won't have to write that. Negative 1 times a positive 4. Negative times a positive is a negative, and 1 times 4 is 4. And the last one. So we're going to add 90 to both sides. Addition property of equality. I have more negatives than I have positives. So let's see. 4 minus 0 is 4. 9, 4, 1. So 144 on this side and negative 9x on this side. So I'm going to multiply by the inverse, which is 1 over negative 9. Or I can just divide by the negative 9. So I know that 144 is divisible by 9. The way I know that is I just add 4 plus 4 is 8. 8 plus 1 is 9. Since this whole thing adds up to 9 and 9 is divisible by 9, I know that that is also divisible by 9. But I have to do that. I don't know what that is offhand, so let's take a look. 9 goes into 14 one time, leaving us with 54 left. So 9 goes into 54 6 times. So a negative and a negative will give me a positive, so that will be 16. All right. Hope you did well on that. If not, go back. This is a really important skill in algebra, okay? Or give Mrs. McHugh or myself a call, okay?